Srimad Bhagavatam Grantaraj Ki Jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Janmadyasya yato nivayad itaratas chartesu avigyaswarat.
Janmadyasetam Vayaritaratas Chatesu Avigyaswarat.
Tene Brahma Hidaya Adhikavaye Muyantiyat Surayaha.
Tene Brahma Vidaya Adhikavaye Mujantita Suraya.
Tejo Varimidam Yata Vinimaya Yatra Chisargo Misha.
Tejo Varimidam Yata Vinimayo Jatra Chisargo Misha.
Damna Svena Sada Nirasta Kuhakam Satyam Param Dhimahi.
Damna Svena Sada Nirasta Kuhakam Satyam Param Dhimahi.
O my Lord, Shri Krishna, son of Vasudeva.
O my Lord Shri Krishna, son of Vasudeva.
O all-pervading personality of Godhead. I offer my respectful obeisances unto you. I meditate upon Lord Shri Krishna because he is the absolute truth. And the primeval cause of all causes. Of the creation, sustenance, and destruction of the manifested universes. He is directly and indirectly conscious of all manifestations. And he is independent because there is no other cause beyond him. It is he only who first imparted the Vedic knowledge unto the heart of Brahmaji, the original living being. By him, even the great sages and demigods are placed into illusion, as one is bewildered by the illusory representations of water seen in fire or land seen in water. Only because of him do the material universes, temporarily manifested by the reactions of the three modes, appear factual, although they are unreal. I therefore meditate upon him, Lord Shri Krishna, who is eternally existent in a transcendental abode, which is forever free from the illusory representations of the material world. I meditate upon him, for he is the absolute truth. Dharma Pujita Kaitrovotra Paramo Nirmatsaranam Satam Vedyam Vastavam Atra Vastu Shivadam Tapatrayon Mulanam Srimad Bhagavate Mahamuni Krite Kimba Parer Ishwaraha Sadyo Hridi Avarudyate Tra Krite Bihi Sususubhistakshanat. Completely rejecting all religious activities which are materially motivated. This Bhagavata Purana propounds the highest truth, which is understandable by those devotees who are fully pure in heart. The highest truth is reality distinguished from illusion for the welfare of all. Such truth uproots the threefold miseries. This beautiful Bhagavatam, compiled by the great sage Vyasadeva in his maturity, is sufficient in itself for God realization. What is the need of any other scripture? As soon as one attentively and submissively hears the message of Bhagavatam, by this culture of knowledge, the Supreme Lord is established within his heart. Nigama kalpatarur galitam phalam sukhamakad amrita dravya samyutam pibata bhagavatam rasam alayam muhur ahur rasika bhuvi bhavakaha. O expert and thoughtful men, relish Srimad Bhagavatam. The mature fruit of desired true Vedic literatures. It emanated from the lips of Sri Sukadeva Goswami. Therefore, this fruit has become even more tasteful. even though its nectarian juice was already relishable for all,
even though nectar juice was delicious for all,
including liberated souls.
including the
Shinvatam Swakata Krishna
Tamsakata Krishna,
Punya Shravana Kirtana
Punya Shravanam Kirtana,
Hridyantaksto Bhadrani
Vidyantasto Hiyabhadrani,
Vidunati Suhitsatam.
Vidunati Suhit Satam.
To hear about Krishna from Vedic literatures,
Hereby Krishna from Vedic,
or to hear from him directly through the Bhagavad Gita,
or to hear from him that directly from Srimad Bhagavatam,
is itself righteous activity.
it is self-righteous activity.
And for one who hears about Krishna,
The one who hears about Krishna,
Lord Krishna, who is dwelling in everyone's heart,
the Krishna can
acts as a best-wishing friend
acts as a best wishing
and purifies the devotee
and purified toward,
who constantly engages in hearing of him.
who constantly engage in hearing with him.
In this way, a devotee
In this way, a devotee
naturally develops his dormant transcendental knowledge.
naturally develops the dormant.
As he hears more about Krishna from the Bhagavatam and from the devotees, he becomes fixed in devotional service of the Lord. Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 13, verse number 20. Yena chaiva pipano yam pranay priyatamairapi janasadyo viyujeta
Janasadyo viyojeta
kim utanyar danadibihi.
kimutam nirdhanadibi.
Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. A great Indian scientist, busy in the plan-making business.
Translation.
Translation. Whoever is under the influence of supreme Kala, eternal time, must surrender his most dear life, and what to speak of other things such as wealth, honor, children, land, and home. Translation. Whoever is under the influence of supreme Kala, eternal time, must surrender his most dear life, and what to speak of other things such as wealth, honor, children, land, and home. Purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. A great Indian scientist, busy in the plan-making business, was suddenly called by invincible eternal time while going to attend a very important meeting of the Planning Commission. And he had to surrender his life, wife, children, house, land, wealth, etc. During the political upsurge in India and its division into Pakistan and Hindustan, so many rich and influential Indians had to surrender life, property, and honor due to the influence of time. And there are hundreds and thousands of examples like that all over the world, all over the universe, which are all effects of the influence of time. Therefore, the conclusion is that there is no powerful living being within the universe who can overcome the influence of time. Many poets have written verses lamenting the influence of time. Many devastations have taken place over the universes due to the influence of time, and no one could check them by any means. Even in our daily life, so many things come and go in which we have no hand, but we have to suffer or tolerate them without remedial measure. That is the result of time. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. So, this question of time is very disturbing for people who are attached to material life. And it is not daunting for those people who use every second in Krishna's service. It's only a source of trouble for the people who are attached to sense gratification and want to continue that sense gratification uninterrupted forever. That is their illusion. So therefore, devotees cultivate this knowledge, just like we're hearing today, these instructions by Vidura to Dhritarashtra. So this is very precious information, because we need to be reminded on a regular basis of the precarity and tenuous nature of material life in the material world. At any moment, the whole thing can come to an end. And we should be, therefore, Jesus Christ says, "Beware, I will come like a thief at night to take your soul." So that's unfortunately the truth about the way life is. And Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, "Mrityu sarva haraschaham udbhavascha bhavishyatam." So he says, I am all-devouring death, and I am the generating principle of all that is yet to be. So Prabhupada says, as soon as a man is born, he dies at every moment. Well, most people think as soon as someone is born, they begin to live. But actually the opposite is true. As soon as a person is born, they die at every moment. Thus death is devouring every living entity at every moment. But the last stroke is called death itself. That death is Krishna. So we are dying at every moment, right from birth. And the final moment is called death, but actually every moment is death. And so is this something that we can accept? Well, most people won't accept it. They say, oh, if you accept that, that's a very negative way of looking at life. You won't do anything in life. You won't try to do anything. That's not true. Why don't we try to get free from this cycle of birth and death? How about that? What do you mean you won't do anything? You won't have any sense gratification. Maybe. But you can't stop sense gratification anyway. When you have a nice feast, isn't that sense gratification? When you take a bath once, twice, 3 times a day, isn't that sense gratification? When you are taking care of the body so it doesn't interfere with your service, isn't that some kind of sense gratification? It is. But you're grooming the senses to engage full-time in Krishna consciousness. That's different than using the senses to dissipate their vigor and energy through sense gratification. Sense gratification always weakens a person. But grooming the senses to be engaged very actively in Krishna consciousness makes one enthusiastic, makes one energetic, gives one hope and positive thoughts. So that includes the mind. So the mind is the sixth sense. So it's not only the body. So health, real health or spiritual well-being, depends on regulating the activities of the senses and keeping them engaged as much as possible in Krishna's service. Then you get vigor. Your ojas, or your life force, increases. And because what's happening in your mind will affect what's happening in the rest of the body, because the mind is, let's say, the strongest sense. It's receiving the information from all the other senses and putting it in some kind of a memory bank. So it's receiving and storing all these sense experiences, and the mind is accepting and rejecting on the basis of sense gratification. So when the intelligence is controlling the mind and the intelligence is right next to the soul, then the mind is not so fickle or unpredictable. But when the intelligence is weak and the mind is stronger, then the mind becomes very whimsical and fickle, and one begins to make major mistakes in life. So, first thing is to understand that from the moment of birth, we begin to die. In this sense that Krishna is all-pervading everywhere, and he's the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he's the controller, he's the enjoyer, and so forth. When we forget that, that puts us in a very, let's say, precarious situation, and death can come at any time. So, when Krishna wants to protect his devotee so the devotee can continue devotional service, even death cannot touch such a devotee. But if a person engages in sense gratification and they develop all kinds of material desires, those desires weaken their determination for sense gratification, and it basically puts the mind in control, the fickle mind in control, and that affects the intelligence, and that affects the soul, in the sense that the soul it becomes misled. It develops false conclusions about life. Instead of, from the moment of birth we begin to die, we start thinking from the moment of birth we begin to live. And living means engaging in sense gratification, and you need money to do that, you need this, you need that. So it gets us involved and entangled so tightly in material nature that it's almost impossible to get out. The only possibility is through association with a pure devotee and devotees, and then regularly hearing. And then we have a chance to get out of this entanglement. Otherwise, it's impossible. It's just like Krishna describes the banyan tree, the inverted banyan tree in the material world. It has innumerable branches, and each branch roots also. So it's difficult to understand where the roots are. Well, first of all, the roots are not below, but they're above. So normally we look for the roots below, but in this insurmountable banyan tree of material illusion, the roots are upward and the branches are downward. So Krishna says, Urdvam mulam adasa ko asvatam prahur avyayam chandam si yasya parnani yastam veda suvedavit. The Supreme Personality of God has said, it is said that there is an imperishable banyan tree that has its roots upward and its branches down, and whose leaves are the Vedic hymns. One who knows this tree is the knower of the Vedas. So, this is an important verse, and it basically, this part of the Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita, its 15th chapter, is to help us to understand that the purpose of Vedic study is to understand Krishna and come to the conclusion that I must remain always engaged in devotional service. So therefore, one who's in Krishna consciousness engages in devotional service. Thus, they actually know the purport of the Vedas. Without devotional service, one may have so much knowledge, but it's really not of any use because they're not engaged in devotional service. That's the purpose of the Vedic knowledge, to be engaged full-time in devotional service. So Prabhupada says, the entanglement of this material world is compared here to a banyan tree. For one who is engaged in fruitive activities, meaning materialistic activities meant for sense gratification, there is no end to the banyan tree. He wanders from one branch to another, to another, to another. The tree of this material world has no end, and for one who is attached to this tree, there's no possibility of liberation. The Vedic hymns meant for elevating oneself are called the leaves of this tree. This tree's roots grow upward because they begin from where Brahma is located, the topmost planet of this universe. If one can understand this indestructible tree of illusion, then one can get out of it. Now you might ask a question, wait a minute, why does it say that the leaves of this tree are the Vedic hymns, if it's a tree of illusion? Well, because the Vedic hymns are meant to help one gradually elevate themselves from illusion to Krishna consciousness. So there is some hope even on this, let's say, unending entanglement of the banyan tree of the material world. So Prabhupada next says, the process of extrication, in other words, the process of how to get out of this entanglement, should be understood. In the previous chapters, it has been explained that there are many processes by which to get out of the material entanglement. And up to the 13th chapter, we have seen that devotional service to the Supreme Lord is the best way. Now, the basic principle of devotional service is detachment from material activities and attachment to the transcendental service of the Lord. The process of breaking attachment to the material world is discussed in the beginning of this chapter. The root of this material existence grows upward. This means that it begins from the total material substance, from the topmost planet of the universe. From there, the whole universe is expanded, with so many branches representing the various planetary systems. The fruits represent the results of the living entity's activities, namely religion, economic development, sense gratification, and liberation. Now, there is no ready experience in this world of a tree situated with its branches down and its roots upward. But there is such a thing. That tree can be found beside a reservoir of water. We can see that the trees on the bank reflect upon the water with their branches down and roots up. In other words, the tree of the material world is only a reflection of the real tree of the spiritual world. This reflection of the spiritual world is situated on desire, just as a tree's reflection is situated on water. Desire is the cause of things being situated in this reflected material light. So, does that mean all desires? No, it means material desires. The desire to serve Krishna is different. But the material desires to serve our own sense gratification is the cause of our entanglement. One who wants to get out of this material existence must know this tree thoroughly through analytical study. Then he can cut off his relationship with it. This tree, being the reflection of the real tree, is an exact replica. Everything is there in the spiritual world. The impersonalists take Brahman to be the root of this material tree, and from the root, according to Sankhya philosophy, come Prakriti, Purusha, and then the three gunas, then the five gross elements, Panchamahabhuta, then the 10 senses, Dasendriya, mind, etc. In this way, they divide up the whole material world into 24 elements. If Brahman is the center of all manifestations, then this material world is a manifestation of the center by 180 degrees, and the other 180 degrees constitute the spiritual world. The material world is a perverted reflection, so the spiritual world must have the same variegatedness, but in reality. Well, reality means that it's eternal, and it's not affected in any way by the modes of material nature, or time also. The Prakriti is the external energy of the Supreme Lord, and the Purusha is the Supreme Lord himself, and that is explained in Bhagavad Gita. Since this manifestation is material, it is temporary. A reflection is temporary, for it is sometimes seen and sometimes not seen. But the origin from whence the reflection is reflected is eternal. The material reflection of the real tree has to be cut off. When it is said that a person knows the Vedas, it is assumed that he knows how to cut off attachment to this material world. If one knows that process, he actually knows the Vedas. One who is attracted by the ritualistic formulas of the Vedas is attracted by the beautiful green leaves of the tree. He does not exactly know the purpose of the Vedas. The purpose of the Vedas, as disclosed by the personality of God himself is to cut down this reflected tree and attain the real tree of the spiritual world. So when we use the Vedic hymns to improve our sense gratification, we're going in the wrong direction. But if we accept the Vedic hymns to glorify Krishna and not to attain sense gratification, then we're going in the right direction. So it's a very tricky thing. The Vedas can do two things. They can entangle you more, or they can gradually liberate you. But if we, instead of focusing on all those different Vedic hymns, if we just focus on the Hare Krishna mantra and engage in devotional service and see the diminishing level of our material desires until they're all changed into desires to please Krishna, then we have understood the Vedas. And then we achieve the goal of the Vedas, which is to go back to Godhead. Hare Krishna. All glories to Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Any questions?
Maharaj, I would like to ask, why when somebody takes to Krishna consciousness and then later on he realizes his weaknesses and somebody think that the process is not working on him, and well, this is the answer usually I give is say, well, before we came to Krishna consciousness, the Supreme Lord knew our past, he knew our present and knew the future. So he's giving us opportunity to strive, to make advancement. Instead of being discouraged. Is that correct? I mean,
okay, so you're saying that the person, the devotee, can become discouraged even though they're in Krishna consciousness. Is that what you're saying?
Right, yeah. Well, practicing, and then he find himself, completely in a mess, something.
Well, that mess, that type of situation when a devotee gets into a mess, is actually good. Because if you realize that I have strayed away from the path of strictly following. And the solution to this this mess is pushing me to get back on the right track of strictly following. And then it'll go away, the mess. But if I remain weak and adamant not to strictly follow, then it just gets worse. You see. So difficulties in life are actually impetus to become more serious about spiritual life. If everything is going okay, you have sense gratification, you have some Krishna consciousness, that is actually dangerous. Because that's like having an accident on the Royal Road, you see. The accident is that gradually you accommodated having sense gratification and chanting Hare Krishna. But difficulties come, and they're always going to come, because it's the nature of the material world. It's to remind us that we have become inattentive about following strictly the rules and regulations of Krishna consciousness. Inattentive. That's the cause of fall down, inattention. Therefore, we should not be afraid of difficulties, of bankruptcy or war or disease, any of these things. All these things are to remind us, hey, Prabhu, time to get more serious. Right? And when we do feel that we're faltering, that's when we need most good association. But if we always have good association, then every day we're reminded, wait a minute, the slippery slope is there, but I'm not going to go near it. I'm going to just stay on solid ground of strictly following Prabhupada's instructions. Right? So that reminding on a regular basis every day is necessary to keep the devotee utsaha, enthusiastic. One is enthusiastic by using their intelligence to make the right decisions. So when you make the right decisions to keep yourself in Krishna consciousness, then you feel enthusiastic. And when you start making wrong decisions that take you away from Krishna consciousness, you become forlorn and, let's say, agitated and unhappy. Okay? So utsaha, we have to get this enthusiasm every day, and that's based on sharp intelligence to make the right decisions day after day. Haribol. All glories to Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
We should always engage in hearing.
Yes, yeah.
Constantly.
Exactly. Most people are deaf. They have ears. The ears are registering sound, but it's not making sense to them because there's interference of sense desires, of sense gratification desires. That's the interference. Just like Radio Free Europe, which was broadcast into the Soviet Union, was jammed. So you could never hear it clearly. The Soviets would do that. They would jam it so that you hear someone speaking, but you can't quite make out what he's saying because there's this noise that's blocking, right? So that jamming in the mind is dwelling on sense gratification. You don't even have to have sense gratification. You just think about it. It's very dangerous. So this hearing is the medicine for that. There's two things. You have a diet and you have medicine. So the diet is prasadam and the medicine is chanting Hare Krishna and hearing about Krishna.
Okay. Now, how do you make of this? For instance, Rochandas Thakur, all the acharyas, when they sing, they pray. Like I'm thinking this particular bhajan, Paramakaruna, at the end, Rochandas Thakur, but I'm always entrapped in sense gratification, although, So, once I asked a question, I had already asked this question before, but I still wonder why they genuinely think that they engross in sense gratification, although they are perfect devotees.
Well, they are helping us understand what our weakness is. They don't have that weakness, but they understand what the weakness is. So by saying those things, they're helping us understand what our weakness is. Our weakness is we hear on a regular basis, but still our mind is dwelling on sense gratification. And you don't even have to do anything. It's just thinking about it. You see? So you can stop sense gratification physically and keep thinking about it until your moment of death. So therefore, Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, falling at the feet of the Lord, I beg for the strength to give up all obstacles to pure devotion. What is the biggest obstacle of pure devotion? It's the mind dwelling on sense gratification. So he says, I strongly promise, falling at the feet of the Lord, I beg for the strength to give up all obstacles to pure devotion. I vow to promptly shun whatever I know to contradict pure devotion. So these are serious words by a pure devotee. And we have to have the same determination. Bhaktivinoda Podi Prabhura Charane Magaye Sakati Pratikulyera Varjane. So there's Pratikula and Anukula. Anukula means Krishna consciousness. Pratikula means activities against Krishna consciousness. So he says, Pratikulyera Varjane. I'm going to give up this Pratikula. And I'm only going to stay with anukula, activities that are favorable to Krishna consciousness. There's a very, I mean, all of his writing is profound, but but in a few, with just some simple words, he's expressing the most profound thoughts. And Prabhupada says that is Shastra. Shastra is, in a few words, it expresses a magnificent, grand, display of spiritual knowledge, just with a few words. So that's real Shastra. Yeah. Haribol.
Jai Harish.
So, there was once a man